So I'm going to call on Robert Rattray, first of all, who's got a question for Jessica. So Robert, are you there to ask a question?
Yeah, I'm here. Nice to see you all. Big fan of all your work, especially Stephen. Love Paradise Towers and this story. Been there, some of the standouts from 7-0. I was wondering to Jessica Martin, you returned recently in Big Finish in 2019, I think it was. And I was wondering if you had to, I don't know, rewatch some of your work as Mags, or if it kind of just came naturally back to you after all these years.
No, I don't travel. It's ironic. I know we're traveling back to the past now, but no, I live very much. I'm always living in the present, and I'm always looking forward. And I'm very, very grateful that I have been able to have things to look forward to. So no, there's no point. I wasn't trying to recreate Mags as she was. My Mags she's present in these very different stories that the Big Finish writers came up with. And I suppose I just addressed those the same way as when I first met Mags in The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. Each story was self-contained, and I just followed her on her adventures. And I'm not complaining at all when I say this, Stephen, but you know, this thing about Ian Reddington not having many lines. When I have watched scenes of Mags in The Greatest Show, a lot of it is very expressive acting, and then of course being a werewolf, she doesn't. Again, I think perhaps the same as with Ian's character. The mystery and an enigma was there from what she didn't say it, but you could feel what she was feeling. But she got a lot to say, obviously, because it's audio drama. So what was interesting was how Stephen's character, in much the same way as, you know, there's all these Marvel series, all these spin-offs going on forever from what started off as maybe a one-shot comic. Well, it seems to me that Mags could just, you know, she's like blooming Catwoman. She could just kind of go off spinning off into all these different stories, scenarios, times, forever. So yeah, it was a new experience, and I dug deep into my present self, and I've evolved. I mean, I very much enjoyed doing the series, but it's no surprise that, you know, I was a young actress. It was my very first dramatic role professionally. And I know a lot more about life now, and that's not being pretentious, but I think every actor will attest to the fact that you bring your life experience with you to every role that you play. So does that sort of answer your question, Robert?
Yes, I think that's quite a nice...
He's gone to sleep, all right.
No, he's muted again, I'm afraid. Thanks, Robert, that was a brilliant question. We're going to go actually to the aforementioned Peggy Mount for our next question, who actually who's coming up to ask a question now. So Peggy,
hello.
Are you there? It's not Peggy at all.
No, the beard says it already, doesn't it? A question for Stephen. If you had the chance to write a prequel or sequel to Paradise Towers like you did for Greatest Show, where do you think Paradise Towers would be? Do you think it would be as it was in the programme, or would it be sort of luxury apartments?
Well, it's a strange one, because actually coming up very soon, Cutaway Comics are doing a sequel to Paradise Towers. I haven't written it. I've been in an advisory role. It's written by a very talented young writer called Sean Mason. So that's about what happened to Paradise Towers after the Doctor had sorted it all out, as it were, and how things started going wrong again, and Caragnan comes out. So that was very interesting to me, because it's quite difficult. I'm a bit like Jessica. I tend to live a bit in the present, so it's quite surprising to go back and revisit these things. I mean, when I wrote The Psychic Circus, I hadn't written anything concerned with Doctor Who for 35 years. So it was, but I'd always knew there was a prequel story to The Greatest Show about how the hippies got there. With Paradise Towers, I'm not so sure I would know what to do. I mean, in the comic version, there is an imagined journey by which they all vacate the other planet. The men all go off to fight in the wars, and they arrive there with Caragnan. So they imagined that. but that's quite a short prequel. I mean, there's not an awful lot to, in a way, to say about the pre-story of Paradise Towers. I think Sean was right to go for the after story of Paradise Towers. Does that sort of, is that sort of what, yeah, okay, right.
I mean, Chris, it was quite good for you to come back as well and actually reprise the role, I think, as well. How did you approach that?
In what sense? Do you mean in a method acting sense?
You can answer it in that way if you
wish.
wish.
I didn't.
Okay.
I was quite disappointed in my performance in this. And it was something you referred to earlier on, actually, about Ian Reddington going for it. But in fact, the guy who really went for it was Chris Gard as bellboy. And I remember I learned something about acting on this job from Chris, because at the very first read through, he went bananas. I don't know if you remember, Jessica, but at the very first read through, we're all sat around the table.
My God, you've just unlocked a memory.
Yeah.
Because I don't remember reading through, but Jesus, you're right. Oof.
And
yeah.
There's a sort of thing amongst some actors, which is you don't do a performance at the read through, darling.
Yes.
And that must be,
so strategic.
As someone who became a writer and a director, there's nothing more fucking frustrating than a load of actors in a room not doing a performance at the read through, because you're like, well, this script's shit. You know. So it's like but anyway, we did the read through, and I've never really believed in this thing about not doing a performance at a read through, but nonetheless, Doctor Who, you're going to another place, because it's a very, you know, this is, the world is ending. The world is ending, or you're on a planet, or whatever is going on, and you're meant, you know, your emotions would be very high. Now, I came from a fringe acting tradition where it was all quite muted acting anyway. And we did the read through, and Chris Gard went bananas. He was screaming and crying and doing the whole thing. And I was like, what the f is this? And he said to me after, he said, I'm going to have to go there at some point, and I might as well start there.
Yeah.
And he was right, and I was wrong, because I don't think I ever really got there in the performance, because I'd rehearsed it in quite a low down, and when we came to do it, you know, so, and I mean, it was difficult because Deadbeat was meant to be Deadbeat. So I sort of got away with it, although the audience might not agree. But anyway, I think I sort of got away with it, but I was never very happy with it. And I think it is that thing of Chris, which is in something like Doctor Who, you've got to go for it right from the beginning, give it everything you've got, and then you stand a chance. And he was right.
And in Psychic Circus, Chris, you were actually playing, as it were, the character who became Deadbeat, weren't you? So it wasn't the same character, really.
Exactly, yes,
you were going to get to the person who was dewy-eyed before they got their brain blown out. Yeah. So it was slightly different.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a different character in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And you sounded so young.
Oh, darling.
I'm loving all this positivity we have. Right, we're going to go to our next audience question. And I've got Keith who's coming to ask Jessica a question next, I think. Keith, are you there? It's at this point, we don't know if the technology is working. Keith, are you there?
Is there a typed question?
There is, and I can indeed ask that. It's a question from Keith. So you are now, of course, only known as a writer and artist of comic books. How did that come about, Jessica, and what comic writers and artists have influenced you?
Okay, well, I'm going to try and keep this on track because this is a Doctor Who Zoom interview. But actually, what I said before about Mags changing my life, Mags is very much part of my comic story as well. So in short, 2010, I started sketching, having not sketched since I was in my sixth form years. I did art as one of my A-level subjects in the days when we had exams. And I just had this compulsion to start drawing. I'd been out with my family to the Tate Modern, and ironically, it was what I didn't see at the gallery was what made me want to draw. So I didn't see any what I would call narrative art and pictures with stories in it and that looked like things I could recognize. And I found this book in the gift shop, which was all about kind of drawing, not automatic drawing, but just drawing without judgment, just having a sketchbook and drawing things every day. So anyway, fast forward to a wonderful job that I did, which was I was in the musical Spamalot, and the actor playing King Arthur in that particular run was Phil Jupitus. And Phil Jupitus is a huge comics fan, and he used to go every Wednesday, was apparently Comics Day, I now know, and he used to go and buy a whole batch of comics from wherever we'd stopped on the tour from the local comic shop. And because I liked drawing, and I was thinking, well, I do pictures and comics have got pictures, I thought I'm going to show him my stuff because he'll, you know, he likes comics, he might have an opinion on this. And I kid ye not, but he just looked at my sketchbook, looked at me and said, oh, blimey, yeah, you've got really lovely like sketch sheets, like a dynamic line, sort of like Disney in the 60s. Went to this whole kind of, you know, critique on my little sketchbook. But basically he just said, yeah, you should do a graphic novel. I mean, you're an actress. All actresses have written a script at some time, you know. It's a script and it's pictures. So there I was. I went on my little path of exploration into comics, and I started reading comics and graphic novels. And my very first comic was a short comic about the silent movie star Clara Bow. And at the time that I was getting into creating comics, we had in 2012 our reboot of The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. So we're now out of the video age. It was the DVD with the commentary. And I found myself in a recording studio. Stephen was there, Christopher Crazy God was there, and Sylvester was there, and it was like no time had passed, and I was just boring everybody to tears, as I probably am now. But oh my God, I found this thing that I really love besides acting, which is I'm doing comics. And I was very, very serious and passionate about it, and I still am. And ironically, or maybe not so ironically, but I found out that the people that I looked up to in the comics industry, so I'll name one of them. So one of them is the DC comics artist, Mark Buckingham. He illustrates Neil Gaiman's stories. So he's done The Sandman and he's doing Miracle Man. He looked at my work and he was very encouraging. But the thing that really, I think, motivated him to help me the most was he got home after I'd met him at a comic convention, and he emailed me and said, oh my God, I knew you from somewhere. He said, you were Mags in The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. And he said, and I was one of those voices in the 80s who, when Doctor Who was axed, he said, I was petitioning for them to bring back the series. So essentially, most people I've met in the sort of mainstream comics side, and actually in the indie side, they're all massive Doctor Who fans. And then a couple of years ago, a writer called Richard Dinnick, who's written some various Doctor Who pieces, he pitched to Titan Comics to write a story featuring Mags, and he suggested that I illustrate it. So, you know, meta, are we in the meta world? Are we in the Matrix, or are we not? And is it Stephen Wyatt's fault? Yes, it definitely is.
All the blame coming back at you there, Stephen.
No, well, I think it's wonderful. I think sometimes, you know, there is a feeling of fate about certain things. I'm just going to digress slightly. So Paul Ballard was asking me about, I'm doing an audio play about Fenella Fielding, and Fenella Fielding and Kenneth Williams, they're both the protagonists, antagonists of the piece, but they used to whine and bitch and moan about the fact that they were only going to be remembered for their Carry On films. And in Fenella's case, it was just, you know, Carry On Screaming, although she recognized that it put her into an iconic status. And I think it's fair to say that in my career, probably there are two things I'm remembered for, you know, that's, you know, overshadow everything else. And that is in musicals, it's Me and My Girl, which was over 30 years ago, and it's Doctor Who. You know, I have worked since Doctor Who. We've all worked since Doctor Who, but there's just not, there is something about Doctor Who. It's just like, you know, magic words. And I have to say, I'm really grateful because it's provided a kind of golden key to so many other doors as well.
No, it's funny because for me, last year was Greatest Show year. I did the prequel, and Jessica did the 3 stories, and this is your comic book. This year is turning into Paradise Towers year for me because we've got the comic book coming up. Somebody's writing a monograph for Obverse Press about Paradise Towers, and it's the release of season 24 on Blu-ray. So I'm now thinking Paradise Towers. But I don't actually have, I'm not sure the characters, maybe the Kangs, but otherwise the characters don't quite have this sort of live-on quality that they do in Greatest Show.
Yes, we're looking forward to the Blu-ray release of season 24 for sure. I've got another audience question, and we have Anthony up next, who's going to ask a question to you, Stephen, actually. Anthony, are you there?
Yes, hello.
Hi there.
Hi. Yes, Stephen, I just wanted to ask, how influenced were you by the Doctor Who stories that had come before, or did Andrew Cartmel encourage you to start with a blank sheet of paper?
I actually didn't need any encouragement to start with a blank sheet of paper. I mean, when I am old enough to have seen the first Doctor Who when it went out. And what I have always loved about Doctor Who is the fact that it's about somebody who gets into a telephone box, goes somewhere and has adventures. I've really never been that interested in the mythology of Doctor Who or the prehistory of Doctor Who. So I've always liked, I was so lucky to be at a period in which I was allowed to sort of start again afresh. It was quite liberating. I mean, neither of my stories have any references to previous Doctor Who stories or mythology. And I mean, Psychic Circus does because they wanted me to include the Master, but otherwise, I say that was my concept. So when Andrew didn't ask me to drop all mythology, he actually, we just both agreed we didn't want to use it. Does that sort of answer the question?
That's a good starting answer. I mean, it's a bit like a blank sheet of paper for the actors as well when you come into a long running piece like this as your guest supporting artist. I mean, how do you approach the role? Are you given feed, or do you go in with a pre-prescribed idea of how you wanted to try and approach it? Chris, start with you on that one.
To a degree, you always have to bring something to the table. The difference between Doctor Who and other TV studio-based stuff that I've done, like Grange Hill, is that you had rehearsals. For example, for Lovejoy, which was entirely single camera on location, you had no rehearsals. But for Doctor Who, you had rehearsals. So when you're doing single camera and there's no rehearsals, you really have to bring something to the read through, which is then going to be the basis on which you do the performance. Whereas when you've got, I can't remember how long the rehearsals were. They were at least a week though, weren't they? Can you remember, Jessica, how long we had?
No recollection of the rehearsals. That's why I just really, I do remember about Chris going.
Because we did the read through and then we did a week's rehearsal because we were going to do it in Television Centre.
Yes.
So if you were doing it in the studio in Television Centre, Alan Waring, the director would have to do a camera plan.
Mm.
So when it's shot, the cameramen, you do it in real time. It's the same way that they still do soaps now, but nobody else does it this way anymore. But on soaps and back in the day in television studios, you would have 3 or 4 cameras. And so the director would have to do a camera plan with go to close up on this line and all of that. So he had to rehearse it in order to come up with that. And so we did, I think, about a week's rehearsal at the Acton Hilton, as it was known. And then it was cancelled because of the asbestos.
I think we actually, my memory, Chris, is that we actually did all the location work.
Yes, we did that.
That's right.
After we'd done all the location work, then came the asbestos and we couldn't go into the studio.
Yes.
And JNT and the designer came up with this idea of recording the whole thing
In a tent.
In a tent in the car park at the Elstree Studios, which I have to say, I know it was a nightmare for everybody to do, but in the end, I think the results are brilliant, because I try to think what that circus and that particularly those flowing corridors would have been like if we'd been in a TV studio. They would have been naff. So,
I think that's absolutely right. It gave all those interiors a veracity, a location feel to them that you would never have got in a studio.
I think it really worked in our favour.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it was also because the quality of what had come out of the location work was so good that I think it persuaded,
But we must have done the rehearsal then before we went to Weymouth.
Yes, so the rehearsal would have been a long time before we got to
Elstree.
part 2. Yeah,
it must have been. Can you remember how long there was off, Stephen? I think it was 6 weeks.
Yeah, it could be. I can't remember.
It was quite a long time because I had to get another fee because I'd gone out of the original period. So I was obviously very sad about that.
Oh, terrible, terrible, terrible.
Yeah.
I didn't get another fee.
No, exactly.
I got another fee. I'll have to talk to my old agent.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm going to run out of time, but I am just going to ask one very, very quick question of you, Chris, actually, before we finish up. I'm a big soap fan, and I've got to ask you, just give me some quick memories of your time with the revamped Crossroads.
Oh, dear God, don't. Oh, my God. I've been trying to forget that for a long time.
Then we won't answer it.
No, I have to say, it was horrendous hard work. There was 5 cameras, multi-camera, no prep time. And you basically in the studio, you had to shoot an episode a day. I've never had to shoot as fast as that on anything. It was horrific. But the show also, because if you remember, it came back and then they stopped it. And then a new producer came in and they revamped it as sort of Crossroads camp. And my God, I came into the studio, into the office after we'd been filming on location. I came into the office and they're all sniggering in the office, my production crew, and they're all sniggering. And I think, what are they all sniggering about? And I go and look at the board and it says White Horse and Knight. Now, this was a show set in the Midlands, the English Midlands. And they'd written a scene where a bloke takes a girl out on a white horse. Comes and then he takes her to the pub. And leaves the horse outside the pub while they go and have a drink.
It's Crossroads. I would expect nothing less.
Jesus. And I said,
Dale to me.
I'm from the Midlands, and I said, listen, if they left a horse outside a pub for more than half an hour in the bloody Midlands, that'd be in a blooming Balti by the end of the afternoon.
Okay, and I'm going to leave it right there. I appreciate that recollection there. I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank each of my panel. You've come on and been really insightful about our greatest show in the galaxy. I really have appreciated the answers that I've had. Please, would our virtual audience please show their appreciation to today's panel, please?